Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Hope y'all are doing well. Today I'll build a crypto visualization app that you can see over here. I'm gonna go over the features of the app at first. Then I'm gonna talk about the tech stack. And finally, we're gonna go ahead and build the whole thing from scratch. So if you look at the app over here, at the top we have a add transaction button. If you click it, a modal pops up where you can fill in the details for any transaction, whether it's a purchase or a sell. Then you have a kind of panel of summary over here. The first metric you have here is the portfolio cost. This is the total amount of money you spent on buying coins. The next one is the portfolio value. This calls an API to get the current price of the different coins and then calculates the value of your total portfolio right now. Then we have the absolute gain or loss that you made. This is pretty much the portfolio cost minus the portfolio value. And then over here we have the gain or loss represented as a percentage. When it comes to visualization, the first one we have is a bar chart over here. You can see we have 4 coins in our portfolio: Chainlink, Ethereum, Solana, and Bitcoin. For every coin, you have 2 bars, the green one and the yellow one. The green bar is the total value you have locked into that coin right now, and the yellow bar is the total cost, so the money you spent buying this many coins. So you can easily see for every coin how much money you spent buying them and how much you actually gained by seeing the value you have in them right now. And then we have 2 pie charts over here. The first one is the cost distribution. This just shows you what proportion of the total cost is in different coins. So you spent the most money buying Bitcoin, and then Solana, and then Ethereum, and then Chainlink. For equity distribution, this just shows you of the total value of your portfolio right now, what percent is in which coin. So you can see the largest value you have is in Bitcoin, and then Ethereum, and then Solana, and then Chainlink. And finally, you have a list of all the transactions that you ever added. We are using some mock data right now, but you can go ahead and do this from scratch like we are gonna do. So let's go ahead and add a new transaction. So let's say we do a purchase, which is gonna be 1. Name, let's go with Ethereum. Symbol's gonna be ETH. Let's say we bought around $2,500 worth, and each coin, let's say, is around 2,200. The transaction happened, let's give it 26th January 2022. And number of coins is gonna be like 1.02 or something. And let's hit add transaction. And you can see the UI updated, your portfolio cost updated, the Ethereum bar charts, and also the pie charts over here. If we go down, you can see we also have our new entry that we just added. So we're gonna go ahead and build this whole thing from scratch. At first, we're gonna build the backend and then move on to the front end. All right, so let's go to the code. So this is how the code structure is gonna look like. We're gonna have 2 folders, backend and front end. Let's look at the backend at first. The backend is gonna have a Docker Compose file. This is what we're gonna use to spin up the database. And then we have a logic file where we're gonna have some logic, and then the server.py file where we're gonna have our Flask endpoint. And then we have our front end over here. I'm not gonna go into it right now, but this is gonna be a React front end. Very simple. We're gonna have app.js, and then we're gonna have some components that we're gonna build from scratch. So I'm gonna hold on to the front end right now and then move to the back end, right? So in the back end, I'm gonna open the 3 files and then go ahead and collapse this. So we have a Docker Compose file, we have our logic file, and then we have our server.py. So let me go ahead and, at first, let me go ahead and shut down our Docker containers. So we're gonna do a Docker Compose down. We need to move into backend and then do Docker Compose down. All right, so now we can go ahead and delete everything. There you go. All right, so we're gonna build everything from scratch. So I went ahead and deleted it. So now at first, let us build our Docker Compose file, which is gonna be the database. So we're gonna have two services. The first one is gonna be called database. The image is gonna be Postgres. Our ports are gonna be 5432 mapped to 5432. We're gonna give it a restart policy of always. And then we're gonna give a few environment variables. The first one's gonna be the Postgres user, which is gonna be Docker. If I can type, there you go. We don't really need this over here. Okay. Then we're gonna put the password, which is gonna be Docker2. And finally, we're gonna give the name of the DB, which is gonna be example DB. We do need a volume because we're gonna use some mock data, and that's gonna be in the volume. So the volume is gonna be called DB crypto viz data. All right, and this is gonna be in var lib PostgreSQL and data. And you just have to define your volume over here. We're gonna call it DB crypto viz data. There you go, that should do it. And another service we're gonna spin up is called adminer. This is gonna be a UI that you can use to interact with your database instead of doing it through CLI. I do have another video in the channel that will show you how it works, but you can follow along in this one too. We are gonna make this dependent on the database. So this is being dependent on the Postgres that we spin up. That's because we want our database to be running properly before we actually use the UI to interact with it. All right, and finally the port. So this is gonna be 8080 mapped to 8080. All right, so that should be our Docker ready to go. I'm gonna go ahead and go to the CLI and do a Docker compose up detached. This is gonna go ahead and create everything. Now let me go to our localhost 8080. This is what we spun up in the Docker compose file. So we're gonna go to Postgres. Our server is gonna be database. Username is gonna be Docker, password Docker, and database is gonna be example DB. So over here, you see we have our table. This is the transaction table. This is the data that you saw in the app when I first showed it to you at the beginning of the video. So if you do a select data, you can see we have, let me just zoom out a bit. There you go. So you can see we have all the rows over here, including the Ethereum we just added in the demo. So we're gonna keep the mock data so that we can test our API and backend properly. But as we add new data, you're gonna see things working properly. All right, so we are done with the Docker Compose file. Now let's move to our backend. I'm gonna come to the schema of the table later on when we're actually reading or writing, right? All right, so we are done with the Docker Compose file. And now let's move to our server.py file. All right, over here. So as I mentioned, we're gonna be using a Python Flask server, which is gonna directly talk to the Postgres database. The first thing we're gonna do is go ahead and write down all our imports. So we're gonna import requests to make our API call. And then we're gonna import default dictionary. We're gonna import datetime. We're gonna import our Postgres package that we're gonna use and import a pool from there. There you go. From Flask, we're gonna import Flask, which is gonna be our app, request, and JSONify. There you go. We are also gonna import Flask cores. This is gonna let our front end make the request to the back end without running into any cores issue. And then cross origin. And then from our logic file, we are gonna have two imports. I'm gonna comment these out for now, and then we're gonna come back and look at it later on. All right, so we're gonna come and take a look at this later on. There you go. All right, so the first thing we wanna do is go ahead and set up our app. So we're gonna do app equals Flask name. Then we're gonna wrap it in core so that our backend supports cross-origin request. We are gonna need to do some database configuration. So let's go ahead and do that now. I think that's best to do it at the beginning. So let's see, we are gonna do a PostgreSQL pool and call it, there you go. This is gonna be the connection pool that we use to talk to our database from our Flask app. So it takes in a few variables that we're gonna put over here. So min connection, max connection. I'm just gonna put some numbers for testing purposes. This is not gonna be a production build, so we don't need to worry about that. Database is gonna be, of course, example DB. User is gonna be Docker. Password is gonna be Docker. And we have our host, which is gonna be localhost, that is 0.0.0.0. Okay, so that should do it. Let me actually go ahead and install something called, I think it's called Black. All right. Yeah, this is gonna give us some pretty looking code. So let me just do that. Give me 1 second. All right, so we are gonna do a pip3 install. And now if we save it, does it do it? It doesn't. All right, let's just roll with what we have. Okay, so we have the database connection. Now let's configure our app to have this one. We are gonna, it's called PostgreSQL pool, and then give it the pool that we just constructed. All right, so this should prepare our app for connecting to the database. So let's move on to our first endpoint. All right, so this is gonna be the home endpoint. We're gonna call it health check. And let's just return I am healthy. All right, we're gonna try out and see if this works. But before that, we need to actually run our Flask app. To do that, it should be very simple. We just do app.run. We set debug to true because we are gonna be debugging quite a bit. And let's run it in port 5000. All right, so this should have it up and running. So let's go ahead and try that out. So we are gonna do Python 3 server.py. All right, so this should be running now. Let me go ahead and use Insomnia. This is what we're gonna use to test our API. So I have it set up over here. You see we are hitting our local 127.0.0.1 port 5000. I'm gonna hit ascend and I'm getting I'm healthy back. If you look at the terminal, you see we got a request over here. So perfect, we have that working correctly. So now the first endpoint we're gonna build is gonna be the post endpoint, which is gonna insert a transaction. So let's do app.route and then let's do it in transactions. The method's gonna be post. We're gonna call the function new transaction. And so essentially what we're gonna try to do is have a JSON body like this. We're gonna pass it to the backend and the backend should store it in the database. So you can see we are gonna take in a name, a symbol, a type, amount, time transacted, time created, price purchased at, and number of coins. Let me see if I can show you. So this is essentially everything that are coming from the form here. So let's go ahead and do that. The way you pull something in Flask from a JSON body is you just do request.json and then you index into it. So I'm gonna copy paste a bunch of times, and then we're gonna go ahead and do it. So we have our name, we have symbol. All right, the next one is gonna be type. After type, we have amount. Okay, after amount, we have time transacted. All right, so we have time transacted, and then we have time created. Perfect. Let's go. And then we have price purchased at. And finally, we're gonna have one more, which is gonna be number of coins. All right, so this is a good time to pause for a moment and look at the database schema that we have. So I'm gonna go back to our adminer over here. So this is the structure of our Postgres table. We just used a create table statement to do it. Our first field is ID, which is a auto incrementing integer. Then we have name, which is just a character, which is going to be Bitcoin or Ethereum. The symbol, this is going to be same varchar pretty much of 5 characters, because we really don't, the symbols tend to be either 2, 3, or 4 letters. Type is going to be small int. By type, we mean it can either be a purchase or a sell. If it's a purchase, the type is going to be 1. If it's a sell, the type is going to be 0. The amount is going to be the amount in the transaction. So let's say if you bought $1,000 worth of Bitcoin, then the amount is going to be 1,000. If you sold $1,000 worth of Bitcoin, the amount is going to be 1,000 again. However, we're going to store the amount as an integer. And instead of storing the dollar value in dollars, we're going to store it in cents. So if you bought $20 worth of something, instead of 20, your amount is going to be 20 times 100, which is 2,000. Time transacted is going to be a timestamp. This is when the transaction happened. And time created is going to be when you're writing the row into the table. Price purchased at is numeric, so that we can encapsulate more information. Usually a price of a Bitcoin can be very, very small. It can be something like 0.456789. So many decimal points, I think it's called. So you don't want to use an integer or a float. You want to use a numeric. Same for number of coins. Number of coins can be as low as like 0.54678, like a very small number. If you use integer, of course, you can't represent that. If you use float, you are likely to lose some data. So you use numeric, which is like you retain all the data. However, the numeric field is going to be slower to perform different operations on. So that's something to be mindful about. All right, so that's going to be our table schema. So let's go ahead and see how we're going to write to the table. Okay, so we're reading all the fields from our post endpoint. Now we're going to establish a connection to our database. So remember the pool that we had. So we're just going to use a get connection. And then from there, you need a cursor. I do have a video which shows you how you can use Postgres with Python. So I'm not going into these too much in depth. I would encourage you to look at that video if you're confused on how this is working. So we have the cursor. And now let's put our insert statement. So I'm going to copy paste the insert statement because it's a pretty long one, and then we're going to go ahead and read it. So let me go ahead and copy this. There you go. All right, I am going to make some changes to it. There you go. Perfect. So essentially what we're doing is we're doing insert into transaction. And then we have the name, symbol, type, amount, time transacted, and time created, price purchased at, number of coins. And then we're giving it all the values. We're using formatted string. So you can see we can just put the variables that we have over here. That's pretty much all it does. So it should be pretty straightforward to understand. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and execute this. Okay, the insert statement. And after that, we're gonna go ahead and commit our transaction. That should pretty much do it. Let's just go ahead and return whatever we got once it's successful. All right, let's go ahead and try this out, right? So let's go ahead and kick off our server. We are gonna go to Insomnia here. And then let's put Cardano. Let's say we put around $100 worth of Cardano. So that's gonna be 100, and then we convert it into cents. So 2 more zeros. Time transacted, we just have some random times. Price purchased at, let's say we are purchasing it at 0.99. Number of coins, let's say we have $100 worth, so it should be around like maybe 101 coins or something. All right, so let's send it. All right, so we are getting error over here. Let's see what the error is. Perhaps you need a different date style setting. So now what does that mean? Let's see. We are gonna go ahead and right, okay. So if we go to the code, let's do this. So our name, symbol, type, and amount, all these make sense except from here, right? So let's do this. Okay, so this makes sense. For the time, we are passing this as a timestamp object, right? So we need to do some conversion over here. So we need to do a datetime.from timestamp and then put it in. So what this does is converts the timestamp into a datetime object and then store it in, what's that called? Stores it into Postgres. We're gonna do the same thing here. There you go. Price purchased at, this is also gonna need some changing because we are getting the value. If you take a look over here, we're setting 0.99, so we want to make sure this is stored as a float, so we're going to cast it into a float. There you go. And the number of coins should be good. I don't think we have to do anything, but I believe this is a float too, right? Yeah, number of coins is numeric too, so you want to make sure that we get the float. So let's just put this as float. All right, so that should do it. Now let's try running it and see what happens. All right, so same thing we're gonna keep, and then let's do send. All right, so we get a 200 and we get our request back. We're gonna go into the database, do select data, and you can see we have our entry, which is around $100, 0.99. You can see the time created and the time transacted are over here too, and you have number of coins. Everything is just like we inserted. We can, if you want, we can go ahead and do another, but it's pretty much going to be the same thing because it's not a super complicated post endpoint, so this should be fine. So we have that going properly now. So now let's move on to our next endpoint. Now this is going to be getting all the transactions from the database. So we're going to call it transactions. We are going to do a cross origin because this request is going to come from the front end. We're going to do get transactions. All right, so the first thing is, once again, we need a cursor. So we're going to do get connection and then dot cursor. In the cursor, we execute our select statement, which is very straightforward. All right. Then we are gonna get all the rows from the cursor. All right. And then we're gonna return everything, right? So we're gonna return JSONify for row in row. Oh, it's gonna be a list, right? So we are gonna have a list. Gonna do for row in rows, And for every row, what we're gonna do is call. So remember, we commented this out, so let's uncomment it. So we're gonna call this function. It's gonna be called format db row to transaction. So essentially, this is gonna take in the database row, do some formatting before we return it to the front end. We're gonna take a look at what kind of formatting we're talking about. All right, so this is gonna take in the row. Okay, so let's go ahead and write this function. So we're gonna go to our logic file. There you go. And let's see how to write that file. All right, so at first our imports. So we need our datetime over here. We need our data class over here. I have another video on data classes, so you can take a look at that too. And then let's just have datetime here too. All right. So the first thing we're gonna do is from datetime import datetime. Wait, from oops, that's gonna be import. All right. All right. So the first thing we're gonna do is have our first data class. And we don't want it to change once we read from the database, so we're gonna set frozen equals true. Our class is gonna be called transaction. It's gonna have an ID, which is gonna be an integer, a name, which is gonna be a string, a symbol, which is gonna be a string too. We're gonna have type, which is gonna be an integer. Amount is gonna be an integer too. Time transacted is gonna be a datetime object. Time created is also gonna be a datetime object. Price purchased at is gonna be a float. And number of coins is gonna be a float too. So this is gonna be, after we read the database row, we are gonna create a transaction item for each database row. So let's go ahead and do it. So we're gonna return a transaction. So the ID is gonna be the first element. Then we're gonna have row name, which is gonna be the second element. And then we're gonna have the symbol. All right, so after symbol, we are gonna have our type. We're gonna have our amount. So all of these are gonna be from the database tuple that we're reading. So the amount we're gonna be reading from our database is gonna be in cents, right? So we wanna convert it into dollar, because in the front end, we're gonna show the dollar value. So let's just divide that by 100. All right. Time transacted. Once again, this is gonna be a datetime object like this, but we wanna format it in a pretty manner so that the front end can display it easily. So all we're gonna do is just do a string formatting. And the format we're gonna use is the year, then the month, and then the day. We're gonna do the same thing for our time created. And this is gonna be 6. All right, almost done. Price purchased at is gonna be row 7. One thing to note here, our price purchased at, this is, if you look at the structure, it's a numeric field. In the way we are talking to Postgres, when we are reading the numeric field, we are gonna get a string. Instead, we wanna convert it into a float. And finally, we are gonna have our number of coins. This is gonna be the same thing, because it's a numeric too, so we're gonna cast it to a float. All right. So that should be all. So all this is doing is taking in the database row as it's reading it and then converting it into a transaction class so that it's presentable to the front end. Let's go back to server.py and I'll go through this again, right? So our / transactions endpoint is gonna establish a cursor, run the select star command, get all the rows. For every row, it's gonna format it to a more readable version. We're gonna form a list of all the transactions and then just JSONify that one before returning it. So let's go ahead and run it to see if it worked. All right, so we have our get transactions over here. So all this is doing is calling at port 5000 the transactions endpoint. All right, so we're getting a 200 and where is it? We're getting a 200 properly. And you can see we have the last transaction that we just added during the demo. So we have our get transactions endpoint working correctly too. We're gonna move on to our next endpoint. All right, so let's see what is next. So the next is gonna be one more endpoint. Okay, so this is gonna be the more logic rich one. So this is where you have to be a bit more careful. A few things to set it up. The first thing is we wanna have bought and sold constants over here. So our bought is gonna be 1, sold is gonna be 0. We're gonna see how we use these in a bit. All right, and then we need our live price URL. This is the URL we're gonna use to pull the price of a coin using an API in real time. So that's gonna be api.coingecko.com/API/v3/simple/price. This is gonna be the URL we're gonna use to pull the price. Now let us go ahead and create our endpoint. The endpoint we're gonna create now is gonna be used, let me see if I can show you. So you see how over here we have our portfolio cost, we have our portfolio value, absolute gain, gain loss percentage, and then per coin we have the total cost and the total equity. So we need this to be in our code, right? So let's see how we can do that. I think I have a demo over here. So essentially when we built the endpoint, this is gonna give us something like this, which is gonna be a list where every element is 1 coin, and for every coin we get the symbol, we get the live price of that coin, we get the number of coins that you have in the portfolio, the total amount of money you spent on buying those coins, and the total equity of your coin right now using the live price. So we're getting this from Chainlink, Solana, and Bitcoin over here. In our case, we're also gonna get it for Cardano, because Cardano we have in our table. And the endpoint we're gonna call is get rollups by coin. So let's go ahead and write that endpoint. All right. So our endpoint is gonna be called get rollups by coin. We're gonna call our functions the same thing. All right. So the first thing is gonna be our data structure. So what we're gonna use is a default dictionary. We're gonna give it a lambda where it's gonna have coins set to 0, total cost set to 0, total equity set to 0. If I can type, there you go. And then the live price set to 0. Okay. So essentially, as you saw initially in our dictionary, we are gonna make sure that everything for every coin, all the data is set to 0, and then gradually we're gonna build on top of it. All right, so same drill, we need a connection. There you go, and then we need a cursor from that connection. There you go. And now we are gonna write our first SQL query. Let me run it in the UI first to show you how it works. All right, so we are gonna do select data. So we have a transaction table, select data, edit. Okay, so this is where we're gonna dump our SQL query. So let's see. Okay, so we're selecting the symbol, the type, because we wanna, okay, let's just go through this. So we have the symbol type, we're summing all our amount, dividing it by 100 to get the dollar value, and we're summing all the coins, and we're summing these by, so we're grouping by symbol and type. So for every coin and every type, we are gonna sum up the amount and sum up the number of coins. What this essentially is gonna do is for every coin, so let's say the symbol is Ethereum, so ETH. For Ethereum, we're gonna have type 0 and then type 1. Then we're gonna have the total amount for type 0 and the total number of coins for type 1. All right, so let's see what we get. All right, so we get something like this. So you can see for link, we have type 1, which is purchase, because right now all our data is purchase. We don't have any sell data. So for chain link, we have total amount, that's $500 worth of chain link we bought, and the total coins is 31.0. For Ethereum, we bought $3,500 worth of Ethereum, and the coin is 1.47. Solana, Bitcoin, and Cardano. All right, so that's the query that so I'll keep this over here so that we can come back to it for reference. Now, let us go ahead and get all the rows. All right, so now for every row, our coin is gonna be the first object, because this is what we get. Right, so the first thing is gonna be, so this is what we're getting, like this is the result, right? So actually, can I show it to you at first? Let me see. So let's just print the row. Okay, this might be better. So we're gonna go ahead and call our endpoint. It's gonna 500, but that's fine. So if we go, no results to fetch, huh? Oops, I don't have my query. So where is it? So what we have to actually do is execute our query. And the query we're gonna execute is the one that I showed you. There you go. So this is what I showed you. All right, so now let's run it. All right, so we're gonna run it, 500, that's fine. Didn't have a valid response, that's fine. I wanna see my print statements. Do I have my print statements? Yep. So you can see these are my print statements. You see we're getting link, which is the token, and then 500 decimal and whatnot. So what we're gonna do is, where is it? Okay, so for every row, we are gonna do our coin, which is gonna be row 0, because we need this one over here. Then we have our transaction type, which is gonna be row 1. This is over here. And then we have transaction amount. This is gonna be row 2, so the next element. And finally, we're gonna have transaction coins, which is gonna be the next one. You see we're getting a decimal over here because it's numeric, that's why. All right, so now we have everything and we need the logic over here. So let's see what we do when it's a purchase. So how do we know it's a purchase? We just look at our transaction type and verify that it's 1. Or actually we can just do bot, because remember, bot is set to 1. So if transaction type is bot, what we're gonna do is index into our portfolio, which is our data structure over here, default dictionary. We're going to index by the coin, and then we're going to go to the total cost attribute, which is initially set to 0. And we're going to do a plus equals transaction amount. So for every row for that given coin, we're going to keep incrementing the total cost by the amount if it's a purchase. And we're also going to go ahead and index into coins and then increment the number of coins. Right, so essentially what this is doing is for every purchase of that coin, it's adding that purchase amount to total cost and adding the number of coins I purchased in the coins attribute. If not, that means this is a cell. Oops, yeah, this is a cell. So we're just gonna do the reverse, right? So we are gonna decrement the total cost. There you go. And then similarly, we're gonna decrement the number of coins for a cell. So at the end of this iteration, we should essentially have for every coin the total cost and the number of coins. So if you take a look at Insomnia over here, do I have it here? I don't have it here. So we're just gonna, if you take a look over here, this one. So what we're essentially doing is for every row, and by default for every coin, for every purchase, we're increasing the total cost and the number of coins. For every cell, we're decrementing the total cost and the coins. All right, now comes the fun part. So we need to call our API that you saw over here, or CoinGecko API, get the live price for every coin, and calculate the total value of our portfolio per coin. All right, so let's do that now, right? So to call our API endpoint, we need to use some IDs for every coin. So we're gonna create a map for that. So let's just call it symbol to coin ID map. So for BTC, the symbol of Bitcoin, the coin ID that you need to pass through the API is called Bitcoin. For SOL Solana, the ID is Solana. For link, the ID is Chainlink. For ETH, the ID is Ethereum. For ADA, the ID is Cardano. And we're gonna have a new one called Mana, and the ID is Decentraland. Okay, so we need these IDs to call the CoinGecko API, so we have a map for that one. All right, so now our ultimate response is gonna be called rollup response, which is gonna be a list. Okay, so now let's go ahead. So remember our portfolio, this is every symbol is the key and the value is all the data about that symbol. So let's iterate through that, right? So let's do for symbol in portfolio. So this is gonna essentially go through one symbol at a time. So it's gonna go for Bitcoin, then Ethereum, then for Chainlink, right? So for every symbol, what we're gonna do is call the API. We're gonna use the requests module. It's gonna be a F string. The first thing is gonna be our live price URL, which is the URL over here. This is our host URL. So we have the URL, and then what we're gonna do is we're gonna pass it our IDs. The IDs is gonna be pretty much one ID, which is gonna be the map, right? So we have the mapping over here, which maps from symbol to the ID that we need to send to CoinGecko. So we can just go ahead and do coin. There you go. We can do a symbol. There you go. And then after that, what we can do is, that's our formatted string. So let's make sure we got that right. And then this, yep. So then we're gonna do and then the currency, oh my god, the currencies is gonna be US dollar. And then we're gonna turn the whole thing into JSON. All right, that should do it. And then from this response, we are gonna get our live price, which is gonna be, so we have the response, we go into the coin. So we can do over here, we go into the symbol. There you go. And then we have to ending, and then from there we're gonna just get the USD value. All right, so this should give us the live price, and then let's print out the symbol and the live price. All right, so let's see how this looks. We're gonna call our API. Oops. All right, there you go. So it had to make all the API calls. That's why it took a bit. If we go to our API here, we go up, there you go. So we're getting all the price. For Link, we're getting $14, Ethereum's 2,400, Solana's 88, Bitcoin's 36,000, and Cardano's 1.03. So we know that's working properly. Now let's go ahead and do the finishing touches of this function. Let's just move you up. Okay. Then we go back to our portfolio, we index by symbol, and then we set the live price to live price. And then we need the total equity, right? So it's gonna be set to live price. Okay. So the next thing is we need the total equity. And for that, we're gonna go ahead and do total equity over here. This is gonna be a float. And all we're gonna do is we're gonna get the total number of coins in our portfolio for that symbol. And then multiply it by the live price. Okay. This should give us everything that we need. And then for that coin, we're just gonna add it to our Rollups response. And what we're gonna add is gonna be the symbol, which is gonna be a symbol. Then we have the live price, which is gonna be our portfolio symbol, live price. Similarly, we have our total equity. This is gonna be portfolio symbol total equity. There you go. And then we're gonna have coins. This is gonna be very similar. All we're doing is just putting it in the response now. The hard bit is done. And then we have our total cost, which is gonna be once again portfolio symbol and then total cost. All right, and finally we are gonna go ahead and JSONify our response. All right, so this should be it. Let's go ahead and call the endpoint. All right, so we were getting a 500 before, and we're getting a 500 again. Let's see what's happening. So we're getting line 117. I think we missed a casting over here, did we? So we're getting a float. Okay, let's see. So we got the live price, and then we got the float. We're doing symbol coins time live price. No, we are doing it right. I wonder what's happening. Let's see, unsupported operand types for decimal, the decimal, and float. So I think it's complaining because our coins is in decimal, but our live price is in float. So I think we missed a casting somewhere. So let's go back over here. But it is doing it correctly over here though, right? Alright, just bear with me. Let's debug this over here together. I'm gonna go and see if I missed anything. And then we're gonna come back and take a look. So we are getting the live price, which is a float. And our number of coins is in... okay, so this, I'm not sure if this is gonna do it, but we're gonna give it a go. So it says unsupported operand type, decimal and float. So this is the problem, right? So live price is a float, I assume. Is it? Yes, it should be. And then symbol code. So this should be a float too, right? So what if I cast it? Does that fix it? Let's give it another shot. That does fix it, but only for one. So let's see what's happening. Are we not iterating through it? Oh, right. So this should be outside. There you go. All right, so now let's run it. And there you go. We're getting all of them. So coins, 31, 1.47 ETH. Yeah, everything looks correct to me. So we have our rollups working correctly. Yeah, I don't know why I had to do the casting here. I did not need to do it before. So must be some weird casting we're missing somewhere else. Yeah, but I mean, this solves it, so we should be good. But I really want to know what happened. All right, so the backend should be ready now. So all we have here is an endpoint to create a new transaction. We have an endpoint to get all transactions. And then we have a more complex endpoint where we get a rollup stat. Over here, you can see we have a get transactions endpoint. This returns to us a list of all transactions. We have a post endpoint where you can pass it a JSON body, giving it the transaction. And we have a get rollups, which for every coin gives us the price, the number of coins we have in the portfolio, the total amount of money we spent to buy that, and the total amount of value that's locked into it right now. So we have that working over here. Now let's move to the front end now that we know the backend is running. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and shut the server here, and I have a terminal in another screen. That's where I'm gonna start up my server so that you can keep everything in this one screen. Okay, so now the front end. If we go back over here, so you can see our app is working because we just wrote the backend for it, right? So everything is over here working. Now let's go ahead and delete our front end code and then build it from scratch. Okay, you go. All right, backend is done. Now front end. At first, let me walk you through the structure of the files in this repository, and then I'm gonna delete everything. So top level, you see a .getignore file, doesn't matter. We have our source file where everything is. We have app.js. This is gonna be a lot of our front-end code. Index.js, this is just a boilerplate that you need for React. And then within app.js, we use multiple components, and these components live over here. We have an add modal component, you can see over here. We have a summary component over here. Transaction item, transaction table, visualization. So we have all these here, we should be good to go. I would encourage taking a pause over here now that we did the backend. I am gonna have chapters in the video so that you can move and watch the front end later on. But if you wanna give the backend a try by your own, go ahead and do that, and then come and meet me at the front end code over here. All right, so with that being said, let me go ahead and delete my code. For app.js, we are gonna delete everything. There you go, clean. For visualization, clear it up, clear it, clear this too, clear this too, and clear this too. So all code's gone. We're gonna do everything from scratch. Index.js, I'm gonna keep it as is because this is pretty much the boilerplate code that comes with Create React App. All this is doing is rendering the app component, which is empty. For some reason, it doesn't go in there, which is empty. So let me go ahead and cross everything out and then start from our app.js. All right, so this is gonna be a brand new one. Let's have our front end running here. Yeah, what just happened? Oh, right. I need to move into my front end. There you go. All right, so this should spin up. Oh, it's already running. Right, where is it running? Oh, there it's running. I'll close it. No. Let's run it again. All right, so we don't need you over here. We need you over here. There you go. Oh, that was it. Okay, there you go. So we can see in localhost 3000, we have a blank gap over here. So everything's ready to go. I am gonna open my front end code over here so that I can take a look at everything while I write it up. So we start with app.js. All right, so first all the imports. We are gonna use something called Chakra UI. This is gonna be the UI component framework we use. We're gonna get center, text, heading, VStack, button, and something called use disclosure. All right, what else do we need? We need use state and use effect from React. And then we need all our individual components. So we need, I'm gonna copy paste that part because this is gonna be annoying otherwise. Okay, so all we're doing is we're getting transaction table from this component. And then we have our summary, visualization, and add modal. The only new thing is this Chakra provider over here. This is something you need to wrap your whole app around. So you need to wrap your whole app. So you need to wrap Chakra provider with your whole app, right? So you have your whole app and then you have Chakra provider on top of it. All right, so let's see how you can do it now. Okay, so we have all our imports. Let's start it now. So we want a function. We're gonna call it app. We're gonna store all our state variables here. Okay. All right, use state, and then there's gonna be a list. So there's gonna be all our transactions. Then we're gonna have our portfolio cost. Okay, that's gonna be 0. I'm gonna copy paste all our other state to make this faster. Okay, so these are all the states. So we have transactions, which is gonna be an array. We have our total portfolio cost, which is gonna be set to 0. Total portfolio value, which is also gonna be set to 0. Our absolute gain, which initially is gonna be set to 0. Our total gain or loss percent, set to 0. And then we have our rollups, which is gonna be per coin, all the different data, right? So essentially it's gonna be this bit over here. All right, so now let's go ahead and before calling our API, let's get some boilerplate code going. So we are gonna return Chakra provider is gonna be our top level thing, and let's Start with centering everything. We're going to use the center component for that. We are going to give it a background of black. And then the font color is going to be white. We're going to give it some padding, which is going to be 8. Within the center component, we are going to give a V-stack. This is so that every element within a V-stack is vertically stacked. In between the elements, we're going to give 7 as a unit of distance. And then let's give a heading. It's going to be called Crypto Portfolio. And then we give it some text. This is going to be, this is the current state of your portfolio. And then we're going to give it a button. What is the button going to say? It's going to say add transaction. We're going to give the button some attributes. The first is going to be size. It's going to be LG, which is large. The color scheme is going to be teal. All right. And then the on-click is going to be a function that we're going to define later on. Okay. I don't know what this does. Can I just say no? That should work. Okay. So let's see how this looks over here. Oopsie. But was not for what? Default. Oh, they're not exported. Oops. See. So this should be exported. Export default. Okay. All right. So we have crypto portfolio. We have text, and we have the button, which does nothing. That's what a V-stack does. Essentially, it's putting, so the center component is making sure everything is in the center. And then the V-stack is making sure all the children of V-stack is vertically stacked with a spacing of 7 between them. So you see everything stacked properly with equal spacing between them. That's the good thing about using Chakra UI. You don't have to write custom CSS. You can just use their existing components, which is very, very handy. All right, so now let's get all the data that we need. We are gonna use effect. There you go. We don't need any dependencies yet. Okay. Now I am gonna go ahead and copy paste our code. Okay, so this is gonna be our first call. All we're doing is calling the transactions get endpoint, which, if you remember, gives you all the transaction, turning the response into JSON, and setting it in the transactions state over here. The next thing we have is over here. There we go. So let's store that. Okay, so this is our other fetch call. What this is doing is calling the get rollups by coin endpoint, if you remember. So it's getting this whole response. I'm setting the response, so set rollups. So your whole response from here is gonna be stored in this rollups over here. And now I'm setting 2 variables. One is called a cost accumulator and another is called a value accumulator. And then I'm gonna iterate through the list. So I'm gonna iterate through this list 1 element at a time. For every element, I am, for every element, I am gonna accumulate the cost, right? Because you know we have our total cost. Where is our total cost? Portfolio cost. We need to add to that, right? So for every coin, we have a cost, and we're gonna add them up. So we're gonna do 500 plus 3,500 plus 1,600. Similarly for value, we're gonna iterate. So that's gonna be our equity. We're gonna add these up. We're gonna add these up. We're gonna add these up. We're gonna add these up over here. And then we're going to calculate our absolute gain, which is going to be pretty much our value subtracted the cost. And then we're setting the cost and setting the portfolio value using the accumulators over here. Also setting the absolute gain. For the percentage gain, all we're doing is doing the absolute gain divided by the cost, multiply by 100. So all these should set all the states over here. Okay. All right. So this is going to be all our state data. And if you see over here, this one, use disclosure, this is what gives you very easy functionality when you use a Chakra UI modal. We're going to see it very soon. What we want to do is every time the modal opens or closes, we want to refresh our data. And the way we're going to know whether our modal is open or closing is the attribute over here. So let's copy it and then put it over here. All right, so now let's make sure everything's working. We are gonna look at our inspect and network. Yeah, so you can see we are making the calls. We're getting a 200, we're getting a 200. So both calls are working correctly. Okay. So now let's go ahead and create our first component, which is gonna be our transaction table. So let's do, or we can start with our summary actually. Let's start with the summary. All right, if I can type summary, there you go. Do I have it imported? I don't have it imported. So that's gonna be our summary. There you go. Now let's go ahead and create our summary component. All right. So our summary component is gonna be pretty straightforward. Let me go ahead and open the code here. All right. So at first the imports. There you go. So we're importing React, and then from Chakra UI, we're importing container, text, vertical stack, and horizontal stack. And then we are gonna go ahead and do export default function summary. It's gonna take in a few parameters. It's gonna take in a portfolio cost, portfolio value, absolute gain, and absolute gain percent. Okay, and then we're gonna open it. There you go. We're gonna return it. Okay. So now remember the summary was a horizontally stacked group, right? So we're gonna use something called hstack. We're gonna give it a spacing of 6. Every element within is gonna be a container. The container's background is gonna be tomato. Within the container, we're gonna have a vstack. The vstacks are gonna be 40 width. There you go. And within the vstack, we're gonna have our text. Font size is gonna be, let's do 2XL. Okay, so this text is gonna be our portfolio cost. Okay, and then we're gonna have another text, which is gonna be the text portfolio cost. Okay, let's give it some styling. Our font size is gonna be XS, and our size is gonna be medium. Okay, and for the cost, let's just keep it as okay. Let's see what we have. Identity summary has already been declared. Did we import summary twice? We did. Okay. All right, so let's go. So you see we have our portfolio cost over here, but we are not passing it here. So when we're instantiating summary, we want to pass in portfolio cost, which is going to be portfolio cost. We have our portfolio value, right? Is it called value? Yes. This is also going to be portfolio value. Did I spell that wrong by any chance? Portfolio cost. No, it just doesn't autocomplete. All right, the next thing we have is absolute gain, which is going to be absolute gain. And then we have percent. What is it called? Absolute gain percent. which is gonna be absolute gain percent. Weird that the autocomplete is not working. Maybe I typed it wrong. Absolute, where are you, buddy? Total, sorry, it's total gain percent. What am I calling it here? Total gain percent. There we go. Total gain percent. Oops. Total gain percent. All right, so we have this over here. Now let's go. And you can see we are getting it. This is not formatted correctly, so let's just make it look pretty. So if we go to summary, so to the portfolio cost, all we're gonna do is we're gonna fix it to 2 decimal places. We're gonna convert the whole thing to number. There you go. And then we're gonna do a .toLocal string. This is gonna make sure the comma is there properly. And you see we get a pretty looking one. Let's just put a $sign. All right, so we have it over here, perfect. And now we're gonna do the same for the other bits of the summary. So each summary is 1 container. I'm gonna go ahead and copy paste all the other containers, which are gonna be very similar to this. There you go. So let's run you through it. So we had our first container over here, which I showed you. The second one is the exact same thing, but for the value. Third one, exact same thing, but we have absolute gain. And the fourth one, same thing, but we have the percentage. And we have this working correctly. So we have our horizontal stack, which makes sure that everything is horizontally stacked. Spacing 6 ensures that we have equal spacing between the elements. And every element is a container. Within the container, we have a VStack. And in the VStack, we have 2 text elements. This one and this one. Because they're in a VStack, they're vertically stacked on top of each other. All right, so the summary component is done. Now let's move on to the next simple one, which is gonna be our transactions table. So let's move to our app.js, and we're gonna have a transactions table over here. So let's go ahead and create our transactions table. Let me open it over here so that I can take a look at it too. All right, all the imports at first. So we're importing React and then all the Chakra UI components, and we're also importing transaction item. So let's go ahead and actually have one here. All right, this is just to make sure it doesn't error out. Okay, there you go. All right, so transaction table, we have transaction item, which we're gonna come to later on. So if you remember the transaction table, it was just a list of all the transactions. So we are gonna call it transactions table and pass it all our transactions. And then we're gonna return something. Let's make sure we're giving the transaction tables all the transactions. Okay, perfect. Okay, yeah, this one. All right, so now within this, our top level is gonna be a VStack. Within the VStack, I'm gonna copy paste everything and then we're gonna look at it. All right, there you go. So within the VStack, we have a text which says recent transactions. And then we have our table. So the vertical stack has 2 child elements, the text, which says recent transactions, and then the whole table. Within the table, we have our caption. We have our header. This is the column names at top. And you can see we have a name, a symbol, amount, all the headers. And then within the table body, we are going to iterate through all our transactions. And for every transaction, we're going to create a transaction item component, to each transaction item component, we're giving a key just to satisfy the React, and then we're giving it the transaction item itself. So let's go ahead and do the transaction item. But before that, what we could do is comment this out and then see what we have. So over here, you can see we had our VStack with text and table. So this is the text and this is the table. And for the table, you can see we have TR, which is table row. And within the row, we have all this. So we have one row with all the table headers. And this bit is going to actually add the table body, which is going to be every data row. And every row is going to be this transaction item. So let's go ahead and write transaction item. There you go. We are in transaction item. So what does the transaction item take in? It takes in a key and a transaction. We don't really care about the key, so we're just gonna, what is it called? It's called transaction. Okay. There you go. All right, so let's have you over here so that I can take a look too. Okay, this is gonna be a very, very simple one. All we're gonna do is, at first, let's go with the imports. Okay, so all we're gonna do is return a row. Within the row, we're gonna give the data. I'm gonna copy paste that bit too, so that it's more straightforward. There you go. So we have a row for each item, and within the row, we have all the data. So we have the transaction name. So remember, get transactions. Remember, every item is each transaction. They have an amount, ID, name, and all these. So we're getting the name, the symbol. So we have the name here, the symbol here. We have, what is it called? Amount, number of coins, price purchased, time transacted. Everything is right here. So refresh, and this is how it looks. We have our full table perfectly constructed over here, and we have our summary too. Now, the last bit, and a tiny bit more challenging bit, is the visualization. So let's go and get that done, and we should be done after that. So for the visualization, we are going to create the inner component at first. Here we have visualization. First bit is going to be our imports. So we're importing React and some components from Chakra UI. And then we have React recharts over here. This is the library we're going to use for our pie charts and bar charts. I have a video that goes through all of it, how to design charts, pie charts, bar charts, graphs using rechart. I'm going to link you to the video in the description below. All right, so now we are going to go ahead and export our function. It takes in one prop called Rollups. And there you go. Perfect. Okay. Now this is gonna return everything centered. So within that, we are gonna have our VStack. Our VStack. There you go. And then within the VStack, at first, we're gonna have the text, which is gonna be cost versus equity. And then we're gonna have our bar chart at first. Let's give you over here. All right, so what's happening in the bar chart? Let's take a look. So we are using the bar chart component, giving it some custom style. We're saying the x-axis as data key is symbol. This is the tricky bit here. So if you look at our rollups, this is gonna be all the data that we're passing over here. So we're passing the whole list. To the x-axis, what you have to tell is within each element in this list, which property is going to be in the x-axis. We want our symbol to be in the x-axis over here, so we put the symbol here. Y-axis, we just acknowledge that we need a y-axis. Tooltip, legend, these are very self-explanatory. And then we have the bar. So we have two bars, right? The first one is going to be the equity for that coin, and the next one's going to be the cost. So we have total equity over here. Once again, you need to give it the data key. We're giving the key here. And then total cost, right? That should give us the bar chart, and then we're just giving it some color. If we refresh, it's not, because we need to add it. Okay. All right, last bit, almost there. So this is gonna be our visualization. And remember, we are gonna give it the rollups. Perfect, perfect. And you see we have our cost-free equity chart right here. Right, perfect. Now let's move on to the pie charts, which is also gonna be relatively straightforward. Let me go over here. Okay, so the pie charts are gonna be horizontally beside each other, remember? So we are gonna add, where's our bar chart? Not here, we're in the wrong file. Okay. We are gonna add a H stack because they're gonna be stacked beside each other. And then we are gonna copy paste our code from here to here. Perfect. So within the horizontal stack, we have two vertical stack. This is gonna be for the two pie chart. Each of the pie chart vertical stack is gonna be the label, which is cost distribution, and then the pie chart below it. Similarly, over here, we have the text and then the pie chart below it. Let's look at the pie chart. It's very similar to the bar chart. Pie chart, you give it the width and the height, and then you make sure it has a legend and the tooltip. And then for the pie itself over here, we give it the data, which is rollups, and then you give it the data key, which is going to be our cost for the first one and equity for the second one. So essentially, we're giving it the cost and then the equity. And then we map over each of the rollups entry. And for every entry, we give it a color, right? And the way we give the color is very straightforward. We have a constant over here, which is going to have all our colors. And essentially, this is just using the index and doing a mod on that map to get a color over here so that we have different colors for different rollup data. Yep, that's all it's doing. So let's go ahead and see. And there you go. We gotta refresh it. And you see everything over here. We are getting different colors for each of them. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and all the data looks correct over here. So that pretty much sums up everything we needed to code. So to sum it up, we have our app.js, which is our top level component. Within that, we had these 4 components. All of them are coming from Chakra UI. The last bit we have remaining is the button over here, because nothing happens right now. Let's go ahead and fix that. If we go to add modal, because that's the one we need. All right, this is gonna have some data, but it should be pretty straightforward. I'm gonna copy paste and then we're gonna talk about it. All right, so all our imports are coming from Chakra UI, pretty straightforward. And then we're gonna have our function that's gonna be called add modal. We are gonna give it 2 things, is open and on close. All right, and then we are gonna give it all the constants. So these are gonna be all our state. So we have the type, name, symbol, amount, price purchased at, transaction date, and number of coins. All of these are the data you input in the form. All right, and And then we're gonna return our big blob of code here. All right, I'm gonna run you through it, so no worries. So all we are doing is we are using a modal and giving it the is open and on close from here. These are gonna be coming from app.js, so this on open and on close. Okay, so we have is open and on close over there. Oops, not now. All right, so what we're gonna do is go ahead and where are we? So we have is open and on close, and those are being funneled over here, which is cool. We have our modal overlay. This makes sure that the modal is on top. And then within we have the modal content. So the modal content has a vertical stack of all the input fields. So you can see over here, we have our type field, our name field, our amount field, so all the input fields, very straightforward. And then we have a footer section where we have our button. And for the button, we have an on-click event, a function called addTransaction. And this is gonna be a function we need to define. We are gonna define it here. So what addTransaction is doing is setting a JSON object with the name you input, the symbol you input, the type. For the amount, you are inputting the dollar amount, but it's multiplying it by 100 to send cents downstream. For date, time created, it should be right now. So you do a date.now, which returns the time in milliseconds. We divide by 1000 to get the seconds, because our backend expects the data to come in seconds. For time transacted, you use a date.parse and give it the date. That's because what this is going to do is take in your string date and turn it into a millisecond timestamp. We divide it by 1000 to get the seconds, and number of coins is as is. We do a console log on the payload, and then we are just doing a fetch. Very simple. This is gonna call our post endpoint over here. And it's passing the body, and then we're just closing the modal once the response is coming back. So the last bit we need to do is go ahead and actually add it. So we're gonna add our modal here. And we're gonna give it two pieces of data. One is gonna be is open. And then we're gonna give on close. That should be. And these are coming from here, if you remember. All right, so that should do it. So let's go and see if it works. We're gonna refresh. We're gonna refresh. I don't want to take a bit. Okay. So everything's here. Let's add to our chain link place. Oh, oops. We forgot to do something, which is so add. This is gonna take an is open, and then on close. All right, let's see what's up over here. Is open, on close. Oh, right. Okay. So I think I know what's going on. So for our app.js, where's the modal? It's open, on close. Remember we had a, where did we add? So here. So on click is null, but of course it should not be null. It should be on open. So we're gonna just do. So we're just passing it on open from here. All right, so let's go ahead and run it now. Perfect. So we're gonna do chain link. Symbol is link. Let's get a high amount. Let's get $2,000 worth. Let's say we bought each at 15. Let's say we bought around 1,000 coins. Does it even make sense? 15 into 1,000. That's too much. Let's do like 1,500 coins. Sorry, 150 coins. That should be So this should be here, and transaction date, let's just put 01/30/2022. All right, so you see everything worked. New position is right here, and everything updates, you see it over here. So hopefully that shows you how we did the whole thing. So we have a React front end that we built, and then we had a back end over here, which we went through properly. I'm gonna have timestamps and chapters in the description so that you can jump around easily. And we also went ahead and used Insomnia to show you how the different endpoints work. So hopefully that was helpful and you kind of saw how the whole thing works together. Let me know if you have any questions and we can talk about that in the chat and comments below. Thanks for watching it up till now. If you have any questions, just leave them and I'll talk to you there. With that being said, hope you have a good rest of the day and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.